Hi, my name's Larissa, and my sister accused me of stealing her engagement ring at a family party in front of everyone. No warning, no proof. Just a lie that everyone was ready. But that wasn't the worst part. They kicked me out that same night. What they didn't know was I'd been paying their bills, their mortgage, her tuition, and when I stopped, their whole life unraveled. But now I wonder, was the ring ever about the ring? Or was it just their way of getting rid of me? What happens when the one holding everything together lets go? I arrived 10 minutes after it started. Not late enough to be rude, but late enough to be ignored. The house looked just as I remembered. White painted porch, fairy lights strung across the trees, a rented tent stretched over the backyard like a show of wealth that didn't come from work. I stepped out of my car, holding a slim envelope and a bottle of mid-shelf wine I'd picked up at a gas station on the way. My dress was simple, black, cotton, creased from the seatbelt. No one turned when I walked through the gate. Not my mother, who was too busy telling someone how Marla's fiancé worked in real estate, not sales. There's a difference. Not even Marla herself, who laughed loudly from the center of the crowd like she'd been waiting her whole life for this stage. A cousin I barely recognized asked if I was one of the caterers. I just smiled and moved toward the drink table. I was family. At least, I used to be. I poured myself a half glass of whatever was open and took a spot near the edge of the yard. They hadn't saved me a seat. They hadn't saved me anything. "Is that Larissa?" someone muttered behind me, not whispering nearly enough. "It's fine," another voice said. "She's just here for the pictures." And I guess they were right. I stood there like part of the decor. Good lighting, soft smile, invisible. Marla wore white. Not cream, not ivory. Full bridal white. The kind of dress that clung just enough to signal it was expensive, with sleeves that probably had a name. Her hand floated from guest to guest, flashing the diamond like a lighthouse. The ring was big enough to reflect fireworks. 3 stones, gold band. Supposedly custom cut. Supposedly $7,500. She'd said it 3 times already. Loudly. When the guests quieted down enough to hear the clink of cutlery again, Marla raised her glass. "Before we get too tipsy," she said, pausing with her chin tilted like a news anchor, "I just want to ask one thing." I stood still. She looked directly at me. "Larissa, have you seen my engagement ring? The $7,500 one? You've been in my room a lot lately, haven't you?" Laughter. Nervous, scattered. My mouth opened. I didn't know what I was going to say yet, but I didn't get the chance. "Just kidding," Marla added quickly. "Unless—" "You have?" The sound died. No one laughed that time. Even the trees seemed to freeze. I set my glass down. It wobbled on the plastic table, almost tipped. I didn't. That wasn't a joke. That was bait. I moved inside, pretending I needed the restroom. The hallway was empty, but my face burned. I took a moment in the guest bathroom just to breathe, just to remember who I was. Then I washed my hands, fixed my hair, and walked out with the kind of fake confidence that people mistake for peace. The seating chart was taped to a corkboard by the door. I looked for my name. It wasn't on the family table, wasn't even on the second row. There it was. Bottom right. Larissa Sky, overflow table. I followed the label to a folding table near the back patio, next to 3 kids and 2 people I didn't recognize. One was wearing a polo shirt with the catering company's name embroidered on the chest. I sat without a word. Someone passed me a napkin and said, "You're so brave for showing up." I didn't ask what they meant. I didn't want to know. Instead, I watched Marla from across the garden. I watched our father raise a toast in her name. I watched our mother beam like the ring on Marla's finger was a crown. And I thought, for the 1,000th time, you can carry a family for years, and they'll still act like you're lucky to be invited. The sky turned dark without ceremony. The lights turned warmer. People began to dance. I stayed seated. Later, when most of the crowd had either left or wandered inside for coffee and leftover cake, I slipped into the house to grab my coat. I knew exactly where I left it. On the hook by the stairwell, always out of the way. That's when I heard her voice. "She's just jealous," Marla whispered, laughing too softly to sound kind. "She always has been." A friend responded, louder. "You think she'd really do it?" Marla paused, then said, "Honestly, I hope she did. Then we'll finally have a reason to push her out." My hand hovered on the doorknob. I didn't move. I didn't blink. I didn't breathe. They didn't need proof. They never did. All they needed was someone easy to blame. I didn't walk away right away. I stood there, behind the half-closed door, listening to them talk about me like I'd already been tried, sentenced, and tossed out. They didn't whisper. They didn't lower their voices. Because why would they? I wasn't someone worth hiding cruelty from. I was the practice target before the real performance. I slipped on my coat, my hands cold, though the house wasn't. By the time I stepped back outside, the party had settled into that late evening lull. Music still playing, lights glowing warm against the dark, people laughing in clusters. But the air had changed, and when I stepped near the patio, I felt it. A silence. That slow, heavy kind. The kind that arrives just before something cruel. Marla was the one who broke it. "Can I have everyone's attention for just a moment?" she called out, voice too bright to be casual. Glasses stopped midair. Forks paused, heads turned. "I didn't want to say anything earlier," she said, resting her hand delicately on her chest, like a pageant queen mid-apology. "But something important has come up. My engagement ring. It's missing," a few people murmured. "And the last person seen near my room," she continued, letting the sentence hang like bait, "was Larissa." She didn't point. She didn't have to. They all looked. I stood there with nothing but a coat and the pit of my stomach tightening. "I'm not saying anything for sure," she added, lips tight. "But it's strange, isn't it?" Someone actually stepped back from me, like I carried something contagious. My mother stood stiffly beside Marla, saying nothing. And then my father, Warden Kelso, the man who taught me to drive, who once made pancakes when I had the flu in 6th grade, cleared his throat. He didn't look at me, he just said, flat and final, "Get out, tonight." The words didn't hit like bricks. They landed more like water, slow at first, then drowning. I opened my mouth, closed it. There was no point asking for a chance to speak. The trial had already been held, the verdict delivered. My sentence? Silence. I turned, walked inside. No one followed. Upstairs, my room was still the same. Twin bed, old posters. A framed photo of the three of us from a church Easter event still hung on the wall. I didn't stop to look at it. I packed slowly. A few clothes, my charger, the earrings my grandmother gave me when I was 15. I didn't bother with anything that couldn't fit in a single bag. My suitcase clicked shut too loudly in the quiet. On the way back down, I passed the kitchen. A family friend, Mrs. Turner, someone who used to babysit us, stood there with a napkin in hand. She extended it toward me like I was bleeding. "You'll figure it out," she said. Not, "I believe you." Not, "This is wrong," just that. I walked past her, past the dining room filled with half-empty wine glasses and leftover lemon bars. Past the fireplace where my baby photos used to be. I didn't look to see if they were still there. Outside, the air had turned colder. A storm must have been rolling in. The wind carried the edge of rain, and I didn't have an umbrella. I didn't care. A light flickered on across the street, someone watching. I kept walking. My car sat parked beneath the big magnolia tree that had always dropped sap on the windshield. I tossed my bag in the back seat and sat behind the wheel. For a moment, I just sat there, breathing, not crying. My phone buzzed. A message from Marla. "Don't come back. Ever." No punctuation, just fact. I didn't read the rest. I deleted it without a second thought. As I pulled out of the driveway, I glanced once in the rearview mirror. The house glowed soft behind me, and for a second, it looked like a memory I used to love. A second was enough. The rain started 10 minutes into the drive. Light at first, then harder. The kind that makes everything outside blur like smudged ink. My headlights cut through it, but the road ahead looked like nowhere. Red light. I stopped. My hands were still trembling. I gripped the steering wheel tighter, as if that would keep the doubt from crawling in. My coat was damp at the cuffs. My throat felt hollow. I unlocked my phone and opened the app I hadn't looked at in weeks. The joint account. It still had my name on it. Still showed the automatic payments I'd set up 2 years ago when Mom couldn't figure out how to manage QuickBooks and Dad wasn't the tech type. Their mortgage, their utility bills, Marla's school payments, the entire household, held together by my silence. I stared at the screen. Then I tapped. Freeze account. A confirmation popped up. I pressed, yes. That was it. No sound, no confetti. Just a pause. And the realization that they'd built a world off my labor and never once thought I'd stop. They erased me in one night. I'll show them what that costs. The room I was in didn't belong to me, but that morning, it felt more like home than the one I'd just left behind. I hadn't slept much, not because of noise or discomfort, but because stillness has a way of waking the parts of you you've been trying to ignore. Light crept through the sheer curtains of Mia's guest room. A quiet kind of gray morning, overcast but not gloomy. My bag sat untouched in the corner, still zipped shut. I hadn't unpacked anything, not because I thought I'd be leaving soon, because I didn't know what I wanted to hold on to. Mia had left a note on the fridge, just 6 words scrawled in purple ink. Help yourself. You don't owe anyone an explanation. She didn't press, didn't dig, didn't treat me like a rescue case. That silence felt like grace. I poured a cup of the coffee she'd brewed before leaving for work, sat at the little kitchen table, and opened my laptop out of habit. No reason, just muscle memory. I wasn't looking for comfort. I wasn't looking for clarity. I think I just needed to face the proof of things I already suspected. My inbox was flooded with the usual clutter, subscription deals, alerts from the electric company I no longer paid for. I scrolled lazily until a subject line stopped me cold. Temporary cosign, promise. It was dated 2 years ago from Irma. Not Mom, not anymore. I clicked. Once we're approved, we'll remove your name from the loan. You'll never be liable. It's just a formality, sweetie. I'd never put you in that position. You know that. The email sat there like it had been waiting to slap me across the face. I opened a separate browser window and logged into the loan account. It took me 3 password resets. I hadn't touched it since helping her file the paperwork. Still active. Still listed under my name. Still showing a $42,000 balance. No changes had been made. Not one. So I sat with that. I didn't cry. I didn't gasp. I just stared at the screen until the words turned fuzzy. She'd looked me in the eye, patted my cheek, and said, I would never let this hurt you. And she did it anyway. No hesitation, no follow-through. Just used me. She lied while holding my face in her hands. I whispered aloud. It wasn't for effect. There was no one to hear it. I closed the tab. I couldn't sit anymore. I got up, walked to the window, and watched a dog walker pass by on the sidewalk below. Normal life still happened. People still jogged, still stopped for red lights, still waved at neighbors. The world didn't pause just because your mother decided you were disposable. My phone buzzed in my hand. A message request on social media, from someone I hadn't seen since high school. Cassie Meyer. We'd had biology together sophomore year. Ate lunch at the same table for about 2 months. Then life moved on, and so did we. The message was short. I saw your name in a thread. Marla did this to me too. Can I share something? I tapped accept. Your sister framed me for shoplifting during junior year. She slipped a pair of earrings into my backpack at Claire's and walked away. I got caught, got suspended. She laughed when they pulled the footage, said it was a joke. No one believed me. My stomach didn't drop. It locked into place. I asked, why didn't you say something then? Cassie replied almost immediately. Because who would have believed me? Your family was respected. She was golden. And I was background. I didn't know what to say back. So I didn't. But I knew. The ring wasn't the first time. It wasn't a mistake. It was a pattern. One that had worked for her for years. Because she knew no one would question the daughter they'd already decided was flawless. She didn't just lie, she rehearsed it. She practiced on other people. And now I was just the latest canvas she painted guilt on. I walked back to the kitchen and topped off my coffee. The bitterness tasted honest. I opened a blank email draft. Cassie's message echoed in my mind. Not just her words, but the space between them. No one believed me, but that didn't mean I was wrong. I didn't hit send, not yet. Instead, I opened my notes app and typed something else. Something only for me. They raised her like a diamond and treated me like a receipt. I closed the app. I didn't need to scream. I didn't need to beg. They thought keeping the truth quiet meant it never happened. But receipts, real ones, don't vanish. They keep records. The decision had already been made. There was no going back after I tapped that screen. I didn't second-guess myself, not even for a second. But there's a strange kind of silence that follows a moment like that, like cutting the last wire to a house and waiting for the lights to flicker out. The morning 2 days later started just like the one before it. Same coffee, same borrowed robe, same quiet hum of the old fridge in Mia's apartment. She was already out the door by the time I shuffled into the kitchen. Her usual note was there, stuck to the toaster. Take whatever you need, don't apologize for being here. I didn't feel like a guest anymore, but I still couldn't bring myself to open her fridge without hesitation. It's strange what stays with you, like asking permission for a home you no longer had. I took my coffee to the table and flipped open my laptop. Not for work, not for distraction. I had a task. I went straight to the folder labeled Family Finances, the one they never knew I kept. It wasn't out of spite when I started it years ago. Back then, it felt like duty. Something I did because nobody else could be bothered. The spreadsheet was color-coded. Pink for mortgage, blue for Marla's tuition, green for utilities. It read like a blueprint of everything I'd held together behind the scenes. Each entry had dates, recurring payments, confirmation numbers. I hovered my mouse over the first auto-transfer and clicked Cancel, then the next. I didn't slam the keys. I didn't curse. I just did what I needed to do. I wasn't just their daughter. I was their bookkeeper, their problem solver, their silent pillar. And now, I was their absence. By the time the sun had climbed halfway over the skyline, I had dismantled every financial string that tied me to that house. I sat back in my chair and waited, not with anxiety, but with the quiet confidence of someone who had finally turned off a machine she'd been forced to keep running. The next day, the notifications came like clockwork. Electricity shutoff scheduled for 48 hours due to failed payment. Overdue tuition notice from the university portal. Mortgage alert, payment canceled, contact your lender. I watched them pile into my inbox like junk mail, but this time, I didn't feel buried by it. I felt released. Mid-morning, my phone buzzed. An email from Irma. No greeting, no subject line. Just 5 words in the body. Fix this. Lena has class tomorrow. I stared at it for a full minute. No, hello. No, are you okay? Not even a question mark. I closed the tab without replying. The next ping was from the gas company. Their account had defaulted. I'd set up that autopay the month Dad forgot to do it during a cold snap. I remember him saying, "You're better at this kind of thing anyway. Just take care of it." They love to hand me messes like they were gifts. I stood from the kitchen chair and stretched. My shoulders didn't ache like they used to. I walked to the window, coffee in hand, and watched the street below come to life. People with somewhere to be, with lives that didn't orbit around pleasing the unpleasable. Mia came home early that afternoon. She walked in carrying groceries, glanced at my face and said, "You look like you just dropped 100 pounds. I smiled. I guess I did. She didn't ask questions, just handed me a bag of oranges and said, "Squeeze these into something good." Later that evening, I lit a candle and pulled out the small leather journal I hadn't touched in months. The first page was blank. I wrote, "They used me like I was invisible, so I made sure they'd feel what it's like when I'm gone." I didn't write it for drama. I wrote it for documentation. Because if they wanted a trail, I'd give them one. Around 8:47 p.m., my phone lit up. Dad. I let it ring. Then came the message. "Sophia says she can't register for spring. What's going on? Talk to me." It was always like that with him. The demand disguised as concern. I didn't answer. Instead, I sat on the balcony. The sky was starting to spit a soft drizzle, the kind that didn't soak you, but made everything quieter. I watched it for a while before pulling my blanket around my shoulders and closing my eyes. They thought I was still on standby, ready to swoop in, make calls, settle bills, smooth the chaos. But the truth, they forgot something important. Even the best manipulators overlook who's been holding the plug the whole time. By the time I finished my second cup of coffee, the rain had stopped, but the air still held that unsettled stillness, like the sky hadn't made up its mind about whether it was done being angry. I opened the blinds in Mia's kitchen just enough to let in the morning light, then walked back to the table where my laptop waited. I didn't need a to-do list. I already knew where to start. A thick envelope sat beside my computer. I had picked it up from the mailbox the day before, but hadn't opened it yet. Something about the return address, Regency Lending Services, felt like a warning wrapped in a polite font. I slid my finger under the seal, unfolded the trifold letter inside, and skimmed. Then I stopped skimming. The letter was a reminder that the loan my name had been used for, $42,000 even, was now past due. And I, Larissa Skye, remained the sole responsible party on the account. According to their records, there had never been a request to remove me. Not even an inquiry. I sat there staring at that piece of paper, like it had just told me a secret everyone else already knew. 18 months ago, I'd been sitting at the kitchen counter when Irma, my mother, though lately the word didn't sit right, slid the documents toward me. "It's just a formality, sweetie," she'd said, her voice soft. "We can't get approved without a cosigner, but once it goes through, we'll take you off right away. You know I'd never put that on you." I remember the way she squeezed my hand, the way she smiled like she meant it, and I remember the voice in my head whispering, "You know better, but I signed anyway." Because daughters don't say no, not when their mothers look tired. The thing is, she hadn't been tired. She'd been prepared. And now, I was on the hook for a loan I didn't spend, didn't ask for, and didn't benefit from. They used my name like it was a tool, and then they discarded it. I folded the letter neatly, slid it back into the envelope, and placed it inside the folder I'd started building, labeled Contingency Ridge Account. As I was about to close my laptop, a notification popped up on my phone. A direct message. From someone I hadn't spoken to in years. Calla Witt, Marla's old friend, former best friend, the same Calla who'd been mysteriously uninvited from the bridal party 6 weeks ago. Her message started simply, "Hey, I know this might be weird, but I think you need to see this." I paused, then scrolled down. A screenshot followed, a conversation. Between her and Marla. It was dated 4 days before the engagement party. Marla. "I swear I stuck the ring box in Larissa's drawer. Dad will flip, it's gonna be beautiful." Calla wrote beneath it. "I didn't understand what she meant until I saw your name trending in a TikTok thread. I'm sorry, I should have said something sooner." I reread it. Then again. I stared at the screen until my hands started to tremble. There it was. The thing they never thought I'd have. Proof. I didn't get angry. I didn't cry. Something colder settled in me. This wasn't about clearing my name. This was about ending the performance. I opened my email and pulled up a draft addressed to Elowen Knox, my former college roommate, and now a civil attorney with a spine made of case law. We hadn't spoken in over a year, but I knew she'd answer. I attached the screenshot. In the body of the message, I wrote, Subject: for legal review, character defamation, and academic integrity concern. Charleston University student Marla Ridge. Then I hit send. No shaking hands this time. Just certainty. I opened my Ridge folder and began sorting. Every receipt, every transfer log, every auto payment cancellation. I wasn't just saving files. I was building a timeline, not for court, not yet, but for me. So that when they said, "We didn't know," I could say, "You didn't care to." Just as I closed the lid of my laptop, I heard Mia's voice from the other room. "Larissa," she said, walking toward the kitchen, phone in hand. "Your mom just showed up. She's on my Ring camera. You want me to let her in?" I stood, walked slowly to the front window. Sure enough, Irma stood at the base of the porch steps, holding a folder, tight against her chest, like it was some kind of shield. She wasn't crying. She wasn't even trying to look apologetic. She was pacing, jaw clenched, waiting. I didn't open the door, didn't wave. I just turned and walked back to the kitchen, sat down at the table, and opened my laptop again. They taught me to be loyal. They never taught me to protect myself from them. So now, I'd show them what self-preservation looks like. The knock never came. Irma didn't try again. I waited, just in case, expecting maybe a second round, a louder plea, some kind of emotional Hail Mary. But none of that happened. Eventually, I watched her disappear from the Ring camera, folder still pressed against her chest like she was the one being wronged. I didn't follow her. Instead, I pulled up my email and opened the folder labeled Evidence. That word had a weight now, heavier than memory, more permanent than forgiveness. The next morning, I heard from Elowen. She didn't waste time with small talk. "I watched the video," she said, her voice as even as always. "This isn't some offhand comment. This is character defamation, intentional, planned." I sat in Mia's living room, laptop balanced on my thighs, listening as Elowen laid out the next steps, like we were reviewing a project brief. It was comforting in a strange way, how calm she was, how clinical. She forwarded the file to me. I opened it. The clip was grainy, pulled from someone's phone screen during a Zoom call, but the audio was clear enough. Marla's voice cut through, bright and smug. "She's always been so passive," Marla was saying, laughing. "Let's see how passive she looks when Dad throws her out." There were a few chuckles, the kind people do when they don't know if they're supposed to laugh or run. Then another voice chimed in. Kala's. Hesitant. "That's a little harsh, don't you think?" Marla laughed again. "Please, she needs to learn. Maybe then she'll stop acting like she's better than the rest of us." I didn't blink. "Submit it," I told Elowen. She was quiet for a beat. Then, "You sure?" "Yeah, I'm sure." I sat with that silence for a moment longer, letting the words sink deeper into the cracks they'd made in me. But this time, there was no pain, only clarity. By noon, I was at Mia's table again, watching the clouds shift. The city was quieter than usual, or maybe my thoughts were finally louder than the world around me. I hadn't heard from anyone in my family since Irma left the porch. That changed at 3:42 p.m. Another knock, softer this time. Mia looked at me. "Same car as yesterday," she said. "You want me to open the door?" I shook my head and stood. When I opened the door, Irma was already speaking. "Larissa," she said, almost out of breath, like the steps to the porch had winded her. "I'm not here to fight. I need a minute." She held up the manila folder again. "It's everything. The receipts, the payments, the timeline. I wanted you to know we didn't mean for this to blow up like it did." I stared at her. "You're a week too late," I said. She hesitated, eyes flicking to the folder. "You sent that video to the school, didn't you?" I didn't answer. She shifted her weight, her voice dropping. "You're ruining your sister's life." That was the part that got me. Not because it hurt, because it was so familiar. That knee-jerk defense of Marla, the framing of everything as someone else's fault, the refusal to look inward, to admit there was rot in the foundation long before I stopped holding up the beams. No, I said calmly. She did that herself. I just recorded the credits. Irma's jaw tensed. She's not perfect, Larissa. None of us are. I never expected perfection, I said. I expected decency. A car drove by on the street behind her. She flinched like she was afraid someone might recognize her. You sent it to the university, she repeated. When was the last time you asked me what I needed? I asked her instead. That was the moment it cracked. Her hands, still holding the folder, began to tremble. Not violently, just enough that the paper inside rustled. She didn't answer. She stepped back, down one stair. Then another. Then she turned and walked to her car without looking back. I didn't close the door right away. I just stood there, watching the space where she'd stood. The weight of everything that had gone unspoken between us hung heavier than the humidity in the air. Later that night, after dinner, I opened my laptop again. Ilawan had sent a follow-up. Charleston University had acknowledged receipt of the materials. The hearing was scheduled. I closed my laptop, leaned back in the chair, and opened my journal. On the first blank page, I wrote, I wasn't loud. I was legal. It didn't feel like a victory lap. It felt like the first step of walking away clean. Just as I put the pen down, my phone buzzed. New message. Urgent. Charleston University, disciplinary hearing, 9 a.m. Friday. I let the screen light fade before turning it face down on the table. For once, it was going to be Marla under the spotlight. And this time, she wouldn't be able to talk her way out of it. The next morning, I woke before the sun. Not because I couldn't sleep, but because my mind had already moved on. There was no going back. Not emotionally, not strategically. The hearing was 2 days away, and I'd already stopped needing anything from them. But something deeper had shifted. At 9 a.m., I met Ilawan at a small coffee shop tucked between a dry cleaner and a florist on King Street. It was quiet, not trendy. The kind of place where the regulars don't make eye contact unless they've seen you 3 times. She was already there when I arrived, 2 coffees in and 3 folders laid out across the table, like we were meeting to discuss a joint venture, not the unraveling of a family's illusion. I'm glad you came in person, she said, sliding one of the folders toward me. Inside, screenshots, bank statements, timeline charts, school policy codes, and a highlighted copy of the conduct manual. At the bottom of the pile was a letter addressed to Charleston University's disciplinary board, signed and sealed. Here's what we're submitting. Witness testimony, financial conflict, intent to defame. It's solid. I stared at the stack, then back at her. I'm not trying to ruin her, I said. My voice was calm, measured. Ilawan didn't flinch. I know. I don't need to see her collapse. I just need people to stop pretending she's a victim. This isn't about destruction, she said. It's about truth. Once that lands, the rest isn't yours to carry. I nodded. But something still sat in my chest like a stone. Unfinished business I couldn't name yet. We wrapped up within the hour. On the way back to Mia's, I stopped for gas. My phone buzzed just as I popped the cap. Unknown number, voicemail. I listened before I even pulled away from the pump. Larissa, it's May. I heard about what's happening from a friend at the church. I know we haven't spoken in years, but I think you deserve to know something. I froze. Aunt May. My mother's older sister, the one who left town after some fight no one would talk about. The voicemail was short, but I didn't delete it. I played it 3 times. Then I called her back. She answered on the second ring. I've been waiting for this, she said. Your mother never told you, did she? Told me what? That ring Marla's parading around like a trophy? It was never hers. It was your grandmother's. Your mother told her it was a new design, but it's not. She gave it to Marla after promising it to you. The silence on my end said more than I ever could have said out loud. She erased you, May said softly, from history, from memory, from every piece of legacy that had your name on it. I figured as much, I said, but hearing it from you helps. There was a pause. Then May said, I'm going to send you something. That evening, an email arrived. Attached. A scan of a handwritten letter. The penmanship was slanted but neat. At the top, my grandmother's name. At the bottom, Irma's. Larissa may be the youngest, but she carries more of us than she'll ever admit. She sees things the rest of us choose not to. I read it twice, then again. And again. Elowen, who had stopped by to finalize the packet, leaned over my shoulder as I printed it. "That's your ring," she said. "Always was?" "They thought hiding it would rewrite the truth," I said. "But legacy has a longer memory than people do," she replied. I added the letter to the folder. Page 76. That night, just before bed, I received a tip from someone anonymous. The school board had already reviewed the evidence. Marla's advisor had withdrawn her name from the recommendation list. The scholarship she bragged about online? Suspended pending review. And then came the text from Silas. She says it's all a misunderstanding. I told her it looks more like a pattern. I stared at the message, then typed back. It was never hers. None of it was. And I meant every word. By the time the sun lifted over Charleston, the news had already outrun it. I was mid-sip of my coffee when the first email landed, then another, then 3 more. Subject line: Wedding for Marla Ridge and Silas Brandt, canceled. No explanation, no apology, just a single sentence beneath the header. This event has been removed from the schedule by the host. 300 people had received the same notice. Vendors, guests, a couple of sorority friends who'd already posted their outfits for the big day. I didn't smile. I didn't lean back and whisper, "Karma." I just closed the tab. Not because it didn't matter, but because it didn't need celebrating. Some fires burn so long you stop looking for the flame. 15 minutes later, Silas left me a voicemail. His voice was calm, steady, like a man speaking after he'd finally put something heavy down. "She told me last night she wanted to come clean," he said. Said everything had gotten twisted, that people had misunderstood her. But I'd already seen the footage. I'd already read the texts. She wasn't misunderstood, Larissa. She was just good at pretending. I saved the voicemail. Not because I needed proof, because I wanted a reminder of what real truth sounded like when spoken plainly. By mid-afternoon, my phone felt like it was humming in my palm. Notification after notification. Kala had posted the clip, the full recording, the bridal Zoom call, the screen capture of Marla's message about planting the ring, screenshots, transcripts, all of it. She didn't tag me, didn't add commentary, just posted with the caption, "This is what it looks like when the scapegoat tells her story." It went viral within hours. Justice for Larissa was trending. I got over 500 messages that day, strangers, former classmates. One woman from my college dorm messaged, "I always wondered why you disappeared sophomore year." I'm sorry for not asking then. But it was one message that I read over and over. "You gave me the courage to speak out too." It was from a girl I didn't recognize. Different town, different family, same pattern. It hit me harder than anything else had. Not the cancellation, not the scandal, not even Silas walking away. But that message, that someone else saw themselves in my silence. I opened my notes app and began to write. Just one sentence. You don't have to fight for space in a family that builds walls instead of tables. I sat with it for a long while. The words staring back at me like a mirror I finally felt brave enough to hold. But I never posted it. Some things don't need to be public to be true. Later that evening, I logged into my bank account and initiated the final transfer. I moved every cent from the frozen joint account, my money, my contributions, into a brand new personal account I'd opened 3 days ago. No names attached but mine. I watched the screen confirm the balance, watched it settle like a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding for years. And then I closed the laptop and sat on the balcony, letting the night wrap around me like a coat I'd earned. Charleston's skyline was quiet, the sky clear. Lights blinked from windows across the neighborhood, people finishing dinner, Getting ready for bed, folding laundry, watching news. Normal life, something I hadn't allowed myself to crave in years. That's when the doorbell rang. Mia looked at me from the kitchen, one brow raised. "It's your dad," she said quietly. "He's alone." I didn't move at first, not because I didn't want to, but because I wanted to be sure I wasn't moving from habit. Eventually, I stood, walked to the door, and paused. I didn't open it. Instead, I stood just behind the wood and said, clear and calm, "I'm not here to fix anything anymore. I'm here to live." Silence. Then the sound of footsteps retreating. I waited until I heard the car pull away before I stepped back, locked the deadbolt, and returned to the balcony. The sky hadn't changed, but I had. 3 weeks had passed since I closed that door. Not just the one my father stood behind, but every door they had ever left cracked open, just wide enough to pull me back in. Savannah was different. It had a slower heartbeat than Charleston, less interested in appearances, and more comfortable with quiet. I'd found a third-floor walk-up near a park where people walked their dogs before work and waved like they meant it. The kind of neighborhood where no one knew your last name or your family's reputation. I passed the old Ridge house on my last trip back to collect some paperwork I needed for the LLC. It was listed now. For sale, staked in the front lawn, the kind printed on corrugated plastic and jammed into the soil without ceremony. The garden was overgrown, grass tall around the steps. No balloons, no guests, no more staged brunches with name cards and fake laughter. For the first time, it looked exactly like it had always felt to me, beautiful and empty. I didn't stop, I didn't slow down, just kept walking, keys in my pocket, folder under my arm, the sound of my own steps keeping time with how far I'd come. They never called. No voicemail from Irma, no email from Warden, not even a text from Marla. Not even when the hearing was over. Not even when the board issued their ruling. Academic probation, suspension of all leadership roles, public reprimand. They didn't ask what I said. They didn't ask what I didn't. And somehow, that silence felt honest. We were no longer pretending. I used to think apologies were the gold standard of closure, that if I could just get them to say the words, "I'm sorry, we were wrong, you mattered," then I'd feel whole again. But somewhere between freezing the bank account and printing the final exhibit for the university, I stopped waiting for anyone to hand me healing like a gift. An apology is a transaction, and I wasn't looking to be paid anymore. I was already building something that belonged to me. My new place wasn't big. 2 rooms and a kitchen, a balcony that overlooked a row of oak trees in the brick back of a bakery. But it was mine. Every rent check, every plant on the sill, every shelf I installed without asking anyone's opinion. I opened my laptop every morning at 8:00 sharp, not for emails from family, but for work. I'd been hired by a nonprofit that taught financial literacy to women rebuilding after divorce, abuse, estrangement. I understood the terrain. I'd lived in it. And on Thursday nights, I recorded a video series from my kitchen table called The Daughter They Forgot to Thank. I didn't cry in those videos. I didn't rant. I just told the truth. Stories of growing up useful instead of loved, of being the family safety net until it tore, of learning the difference between loyalty and servitude. The comments were steady. No trolls. Just people who saw themselves in the spaces I left between words. One woman wrote, "You didn't just survive. You redesigned the entire blueprint." I read that one a few times. It made me smile, just once. Not the kind you paste on for pictures. The kind that feels like it comes from deep in the ribs, like it belongs there. That weekend, I opened the envelope that had been sitting unopened on my desk for days. My LLC papers, approved, sealed, filed. Sky Solutions. A name I gave myself. A name I earned. I watered the plants, made coffee, let the sun find my shoulder through the open window. Then I opened my journal. Last page. I used to beg them to see me, I wrote. Now, I build rooms where people like me are seen first. I didn't need an audience to make it matter. I didn't need a courtroom or a kitchen table full of family. I needed exactly what I had. Peace that didn't come cheap, but came clean. A knock came once, about a week after the wedding had been called off. I didn't answer it, didn't even look. Some things don't need to be reopened to be resolved. I didn't win, but I walked away, and that was more than they ever gave me.